Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on I-line lessons and embedding displacement in international agendas. Today, we are joined by three speakers whose work sits at the heart of climate mobility and displacement. We have Dr. Alice Bayat, Policy Advisor at the International Displacement Monitoring Center in Geneva. She has nearly 15 years of experience working on impacts of climate change on human mobility. She has led several positions in research institutions in France and at the IOM in Geneva. She also coordinates the advisory group on climate change and human mobility. We also have Dr. Robert Sadoyanov. He's an environmental and population geographer focusing on climate migration, climate change and adaptation, drivers, techniques, and economic impacts of international migration, migration governance, remittances, and development. He is currently an associate professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics at Mendel University. And we have, lastly, Dr. Justina Orlovska, PhD in sociology with a specialization in anthropology of climate change. She's a former member of the advisory board at past president on climate crisis. She's the co-creator of the concept of the South Asian Coal Regions Platform commissioned by the Energy Transition Partnership hosted by the UNOPS. So I want to welcome all of our speakers and all of our attendees. I'm sure that we're going to have a very fruitful session. And with this, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Dr. Alice Bayat. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, good evening, or good morning to everyone, wherever you are. Greetings from Geneva. And thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I would like, on my side, to use my time to actually speak more specifically on how displacement and disaster displacement specifically matters for loss and damage. And I also would like to tell a bit more on how displacement has been progressively integrated within the UNFCCC conversation around loss and damage specifically. And I will conclude by sharing a few key messages that we have worked on together with IDMC, but also with members of the Advisory Group on Climate Change and Human Mobility for COP30, because as everyone knows, we will be gathering in Belém in a few days for the COP30. So maybe starting with why displacement matters for loss and damage. For those who do not know IDMC, we report every year, on disaster displacement across the world. And what our data shows is that, just to speak about last year, in 2024 alone, weather-related disasters triggered almost 46 million internal displacement. So we're not talking about cross-border migration here, but strictly internal displacement only, and mostly as a result of floods and storm across more than 160 countries and territories. It's again almost 46 million displacement that have been reported every year. And at the end of 2024, it's almost 10 million people who were still displaced as a result of disaster in their own countries. I also would like to emphasize that those numbers might look huge, but they are actually also a clear underestimate, because we are still facing a lot of methodological challenges to properly report on disaster displacement, especially to track people after they have been displaced by disasters, meaning that the numbers that we have are an indication of the scale of the problem, but they are probably under-reported. and provide an underestimation of the reality. But that's the data that we have, and it's important to note also that disaster displacement is actually a global phenomenon, so it affects absolutely everyone everywhere. We have data for every country in the world, and just to give here again a few number. For instance, last year, one of the most affected countries by disaster displacement was the United States, with almost 11 million disaster displacement reported because of the hurricane season, but also close to 9 million displacement in the Philippines, 4 million in China, 5.4 million in India as a result of flood and storm as well. So it's literally affecting everyone. But if it affects everyone, I just would like also to say that it disproportionately affects the most vulnerable. Both low-income countries suffer the highest burden associated with displacement impacts, but also the most vulnerable groups, whether we are in high or low-income countries, so women and children, people with disabilities, those vulnerable population also suffer the greatest impacts from displacements because they have more limited resources or inadequate housing, for instance, to recover quickly after disasters. And so the UNFCCC clearly acknowledged displacement as a form of loss and damage across the continuum of human mobility. I don't know if you are familiar with the terminologies that we use in the UNFCCC, but usually we speak more broadly about human mobility, which encompass migration, planned relocation, and displacement. And I would say that even if those three forms of human mobility can relate to some extent to loss and damage, displacement is probably the clearest form of loss and damage across this continuum. And put simply, displacement matters to loss and damage in three distinct ways that I would like to briefly highlight. The first is that displacement is an indicator of loss and damage, because when people are forced to flee, it signals that the losses that people are suffering as a result of disaster exceed their capacity to cope with those impacts. So monitoring displacement, monitoring its scale or its occurrence, helps to identify where adaptation has been insufficient or disaster risk reduction has been insufficient, or just simply where the impacts go beyond the people's ability to cope with it. And it's an indicator of the severity of those impacts. So that's the first way displacement relates to loss and damage. But the second one is that displacement is also not only an indicator, but a form of loss and damage in itself, as displacement can generate severe outcomes for displaced population. For instance, loss of culture, loss of the feeling of insecurity, or loss of agencies, for instance, and that those impacts directly stem from their displacement, not from the disaster that displaced them. And beyond these tangible impacts that people can suffer from displacement, such as loss of income, for instance, or loss of access to services, there is also non-tangible impacts, what we usually call the non-economic loss and damage, such as mental health or distress, that can also stem from a displacement situation. And the third way we can relate displacement to loss and damage is that displacement is also a driver of loss and damage, because displacement, especially when it's prolonged or protracted, can trigger cascading economic and social cost for displaced people, but also for their host communities, their host societies, but also the origin communities. It disrupts, for instance, the ability of displaced person to generate income, pay rent or taxes, and ultimately contribute to their receiving communities. And when those, again, these impacts are on the long terms, it can have cascading impact on entire societies or communities. And it's also important to mention that all these costs associated with displacement can amount to billions of dollars that are extremely hard to measure and to really assess. but there are a few attempts to estimate the cost of displacement that show and demonstrate that it's in billions of dollars that we can estimate those costs. And one thing that, and for instance, we know it that the post-disaster assessment or the loss and damage assessment usually do not account for displacement impacts, which means that all the conversation that we have around loss and damage and the finance needed for loss and damage usually do not account for displacement, meaning that here again we have underestimate of the real need, financial needs for loss and damage. So something that we call for instance, in COPs is to integrate displacement within the loss and damage assessment, so we can properly estimate the entire amount of cost, including displacement. So now, how displacement has become an important theme in the UNFCCC conversation. I will try to be brief, and I see that there is no timer at the end, so I don't know for how long I'm already speaking, but I will try to be brief. But displacement is, I think we can say now, quite well recognized in the UNFCCC, and especially in the loss and damage work stream. But all of this started, I would say, in 2010 with the Cancun Adaptation Framework, where we find the first occurrence of human mobility in the Cancun Adaptation Framework, meaning that at the very beginning, human mobility was framed more as an adaptation strategy within the UNFCCC space, and it slowly moved to the loss and damage work stream across over the years and over the different COP decisions. It doesn't mean that human mobility is not anymore addressed as part of the adaptation work stream. It still is, but most of the COP decisions that we see now where displacement is included are related to loss and damage. And so just to give a few milestones here, I would say, and not to give all of them. I think the first one is, of course, in 2015, the Paris Agreement, that literally was a milestone in that regard, because I would say that all the references to displacement that you will find before the Paris Agreement in the UNFCCC documents are more calling for like enhancing understanding and knowledge around human mobility, so we can better understand that. And from Paris, the Paris Agreement, I would say that we move more from a call for enhancing knowledge to really taking action to avert, minimize, and address displacement. And one example of this is, for instance, that the Paris Agreement set up something called the Task Force on Displacement within the Warsaw International Mechanism that still exists today, 10 years later, to support parties and to provide guidance on how to avert, minimize, and address displacement in the context of climate change. I'm trying to speed up a little bit because I realize that I'm probably gonna speak for too long. But then after the Paris Agreement, another milestone that I think is important, so that you can situate now where displacement is discussed today, is that more recently, and especially we've seen quite relevant development at COP28 and COP29 with the operationalization of the fund for responding to loss and damage that clearly integrate displacement within the scope of the fund, which means that it's also an entry point and it's opening doors for funding activities related to addressing and averting displacement. So that was seen as a quite important step and success in that regard. One thing that I forgot to mention is that even before that, and that's important as well, was the establishment of the Santiago Network for Loss and Damage that is aimed to provide technical assistance for parties to address loss and damage. And now that the Santiago Network is operationalized, it's quite good to see that there is a number of members to the Santiago Network with relevant expertise on displacement who can support parties making requests to the Santiago networks to also help them to identify their needs and make requests to implement activities related to displacement. So all of this to say, and I've been very fast in trying to identify the main entry points for displacement within the UNFCCC, but all of this to say that now you have this broad loss and damage architecture within the UNFCCC with the FUND, the Santiago Network, and the WMXCOM, and displacement is quite well integrated within all of the entities of the loss and damage architecture. Now, at COP30, it's time to move more from the real implementation of these different entities and the work that they are doing. And just one thing that I wanted to mention as well, because that's also, I think, an interesting point, is that I think we should acknowledge that observer groups have played a key role in the integration of displacement and human mobility in general within the UNFCCC. I mean, if you look at I did like a whole analysis last year of the different UNFCCC submissions from the very beginning, and it's very clear that it's observer organization who made a significant number of submissions to really push for the integration of human mobility on the COP agenda. And those organizations have gathered together within the advisory group on climate change and human mobility after Cancun. And so meaning that displacement is today part of the UNFCCC, initially not really because there was a party interest to look at displacement within UNFCCC, but more because those observer organizations managed to create some channels from knowledge producer to the policy makers and managed to integrate those issues into a UNFCCC document. And of course, after they get some party support. So maybe just because I think I'm reaching the end of my time, so I should also conclude. So maybe just to conclude on a few key messages. What are we calling for at COP30 in relation to displacement? So maybe. First of all, to be fair, I don't think the COP30 is not going to be like a major COP for human mobility or displacement. We do not expect like major outcomes of COP30 in relation to displacement, but still there are a few hooks that we can use and be attentive to. And one element that is still very important, of course, is to push for finance to be at the scale the climate finance to be at the scale of the challenge in relation to displacement. And for that, we really need to make sure that the fund for responding to loss and damage explicitly fund activities in relation to prevention, preparedness, anticipatory action, or durable solution related to displacement, and also make sure that the fund, and that's one of the clear asks from the advisory group, for instance, is that the fund have specific modalities, access modalities to provide direct access to the fund for affected communities, so they can, displaced communities can themselves also access the fund. So in relation to the technical assistance and the Santiago Network, we are also calling for the Santiago Network to really catalyze the technical assistance on displacement. And for that, we need the Santiago Networks to be adequately resourced. I mean, we know today that the Santiago Network doesn't have sufficient funding to be fully operational and implemented. So we call for the Santiago Network to be properly resourced and also oriented to deliver rapid and on-demand technical assistance across the whole displacement cycle. Another point is related to the integration of displacement data and indicators into national reporting. You know that one of the big things at COP30 was that countries were supposed to revise their nationally determined contributions as well as the national adaptation plans. And we should use a revision of these plans to really integrate displacement within national planning, because that's also how we can make sure that displacement is integrated into budgetary frameworks and policy frameworks at national level. And we observe an increasing number of NDCs and NAPs who mention displacement or human mobility, but it's still quite insufficient. And most of the time it's just like simple references, but it doesn't really go with concrete actions for responding to that at national level. So I will just conclude on the last point on the need of participation of displaced population. I think we really need also to make sure that those communities, I mean, we know that most of the time at COP, struggle to access those kind of international meetings for different reasons, visa access, lack of funding, and etc. I know that the Global Center for Climate Mobility, for instance, is doing also a lot of efforts to sponsor youth or also affected communities to attend COPs. And I think we need really to make sure that those people can also have their voice heard in the different conversation and decision that affect their lives. So I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there is any question, I'm happy to answer after the other panelists had a chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bayat, for your very insightful presentation. We will, as the doctor just mentioned, have the Q&A session after the speakers have done their presentation, so you will have more time to elaborate more on your presentation in a bit. We will now continue to our second presentation by Dr. Sandoyanov. So, Doctor, the floor is yours to share your screen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you hear me correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
And can you see my presentation in full screen, please?
We can, yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So I'm happy that I have opportunity to present our research dealing with climate migration and adaptation in the Maldives, like example from one of the low-lying island. So our the presentation is based off the results from our research, which is now in 2 papers under review. So this is let's say hot results, we can say. So the main objective of our research was to present like a changing of narrative of necessary out migration from low-lying islands due to climate change, an example of Maldives. And we used the longitudinal study like one of the main approach and main original approach for this research. So we have a couple research questions, but for today I prepared a presentation about 3 of them. So the first one is about how do Maldivian leaders perceive the situation of potential need to leave the islands, the country due to climate change impacts. It will evacuation to be a necessary step for the whole society in the future, and what key opportunities might they consider for adapting and staying in the islands. Yeah. So on the picture you can see the Male, the capital, the name for the island and the capital of the country, and the behind the Male you can see the whole Male Island. This is an artificial island with a new modern airport. So just some fundamental geographical information about the country. So Maldives are archipelago of almost 1,200 coral islands, which are grouped into 26 atolls. And the number of inhabitants of the country is, according some sources, 400,000. However, I found also a different number, more than 500,000, which are all together with immigrants working on a tourist resort. Yeah. So the highest nature point is about the 2.5 meters. So it means that like a local Mount Everest is not so high. So and this is one of the problem for the country, yeah, because 80% of the land is below 1 meter above the sea level. Yeah. So among the nature hazards which are affected the country is tsunami, beach erosion, as I mentioned, low elevation. That's why the local governments supported the concept of safe islands, because they don't have the money to, or the sources to protect all more than 1 1,000 islands. So that's why they selected just a few tens of like a more protected islands against the tsunamis and erosion. However, this concept is not so much favored within the local population. So among the main environmental risks are drink water excess, the problem with the drink water excess, pollution of environment, and the coral reef destruction and bleaching, which is also affecting the tourist industry, which is the main source of the money for the economy, and overpopulated capital. Yeah, so the Malay Island is a very small island. Yeah, in fact. So we developed like a new concept of migration as non-adaptation. So which is based in fact on the concept of migration as adaptation. So we upgraded the concept and we proposed the new concept, which is based on the idea that migration due to climate change impact is considered as an unacceptable adaptation strategy for a local population. Yeah. However, the people live in a, let's say, very extremely affected area by a climate change impacts, but they migration decision is based on a completely different reasons than a climate change or environmental changes. Yeah. So we try to by developing this a new concept, we try to contribute to the like a greater understanding of a local residents migration or non-migration decision. Yeah. So this increase, we believe that this increase need to be like a one of the development strategy for a local population, because they prefer to adapt regionally, especially in urban areas in most cases. So and they prefer to stay in place. So they prefer to have a like an in situ adaptation, because they believe that that's first that's a possible, and secondly they believe that they don't want to, for example, lose the tradition, history, language, religion, etc. Yeah. So they also believe that this could be a one of the strategy for poverty reduction and for a social protection. So that's why our respondents, or some of our respondents, supported these programs, which also targeted this area, not only the rural area, but also the urban area, to protect against this poverty and against these social problems which are also affected by the local population. Yeah. So we understood that this internal immigration is strongly connected with the geographical concept of urbanization. So, and secondly, we also strongly believe that this urbanization is a part of this demographic changes in the country. So that's why we believe that like a climate immigration on an internal level will have a big impact on a society, and the local governments will need to adapt for the population coming to the cities. So the climate migration is usually viewed like some negative aspect of climate change impacts or climate change effects or any other environmental changes. So, however, we believe that climate migration is reality. So, thus the policymakers must to be prepared to ensure flexible social protection, and also some planning for the urbanization, to be prepared for the like a flow of people coming because of the combination of different reasons, including the climate change impacts to the cities. Yeah. So and this like a new flow of immigrants could be like a positive momentum which could be used for a better development of the country. But you know, this concept is is based on like a global level results. Yeah, this is not an only the example for the Maldives. So come back to the Maldives for our research there. So as I already mentioned, we used the longitudinal approach. We used both qualitative and quantitative. However, for today, I prepared our qualitative analysis, which is based on our survey from the 2013, 17, and 23. We used anonymous, semi-structured, and in-depth interviews, which were focused on respondents in each on the same respondents in each time, and in case we didn't have opportunity to speak with the same respondents, we try to find interviews covered the respondents in the same or similar position. Yeah. So at the end, we have 37 interviews with the 25 respondents in the 19 leader positions. Yeah. So among our respondents were policymakers, decision makers from the ministries and agencies, influential people from the business and administration, as well as the experts in academia and non-profit sector. So we believe that they present a reasonable sample because the Maldives is a very small country where the decision-making powers and the core experts portfolio is highly concentrated in a capital or the airlines surroundings. Yeah, so this is on the map. You can see this is Malay Island and Veligli Islands, as I mentioned, Hulu Island. So this is the places which we will start our surveys at the beginning in 2013. So we have a 4 main surveying topics, but for today I prepared just only the first and fourth time. So I would like to speak a little bit about the perception of environmental changes between our respondents, but mainly about the migration patterns or narratives. So at the beginning, I would like to mention that our respondents identified like the main 5 adaptation strategies. So the first one was the desalinization, because no underground and rainy water is using in a city, so it means in the most populated area. So that's why the desalinization units or factories are used like a main source for the water. So that was like a solution about the water deficiency. The second one was the building of new artificial islands. Uh, However, the main material for the construction of the islands was from the coral reefs, which is like a main ecological problems for the country, and also uh, probably in the future the main economic problems, because as I already mentioned, Maldives are strongly dependent on the tourist industry and the money coming from the tourists. Yeah. The third one strategy was the build anti-erosion measures on the islands. I will show you on a picture. And the construction of new houses with a higher elevation was mentioned like a main 4 adaptation strategy. However, it's now a little bit, there is a problem with the elevation of the houses. I will show you on the pictures. And the last one was, I already mentioned the population or like a planet relocation from the threatened islands. This is the government, the concept of the safe island. Yeah. So on this picture, you can see this anti-erosion and sea walls protection from the main island, from the Male. Here are the pictures from the new artificial island, Hulmale. You can see on the top the picture the older houses. That was the the first houses which were built from the local population and from the new immigrants coming to the Mala surroundings. As you can see here, so the first floor is elevated. So let's say on the 0 floor is nobody lives here. However, in the new houses, which are now built under construction of the Chinese companies, so you can see the first floor is not elevated. So it's not protected against the tsunami, for example, from any floods, but also for a sea level rise. Yeah, so this is more efficient from the economic perspective is more efficiency construction, but from the protection of the population is not so much efficiency. This mix of pictures, you can see how the coral reefs are used for building of the new artificial island. So you can see this is the coral reefs which are destroyed here in this machine, and then this sand which you can see here in the middle of the picture is used for the building of this kind of island. You can see that, yeah. And here, this is the last island. On the map, you can see how the development of the new artificial island. This is the Male, the capital. This is the new artificial island, Hule, Hulmale, and Farkufulshi. And you can see that the darker and darker color can show you the last development of the island. Yeah. So on this picture, you can see that this Hulmale Island, Hulve Islands are already populated, and the last one is still the houses are under reconstruction. However, it's already started, which you can see on this last satellite picture. Yeah, this is the picture of the one of the last housing area. So about our findings, so we observed like a significant changes in a perception and also decision making during this decade in which the interviews were conducted. The first one is that original opinion that like radical measures to mitigate global climate change were not taken. So, for example, they still the respondents in 2013 they still had in their memory the 2009 underwater government meeting, which like aimed to show the world the potential threats of the future flooding of Maldives because of the sea level rise. So this opinion of the respondents later changed it to a firm decision to stay and adapt in the current conditions in the Maldives. The second one was like a shift from the assertion that entire country would like need to be relocated in a future to believe in successful local adaptation strategies. Yeah, so overall, this has been a shift in thinking over the decade. Yeah, so from expecting a future outside their own islands and believe that safety measures are taken and it's possible to stay and adapt. Yeah. Initially in 2013, respondents were thinking about the possible relocation to the India, Sri Lanka, and Australia, like a wall nation, because also one of the former president planned to buy a land in these countries for the possible relocation in the whole country. Yeah. In 2017, just only 25% of our respondents, especially from the non-profit and academic sectors, mentioned this opinion again. However, 2 years ago, during our last survey, our respondents definitely rejected this opportunity, this option, preferring the local institute adaptation strategies. So we identify the following obstacles or the reasons for not outmigration. Sorry, that's a mistake. So it was the root, so the family, tradition, land, so they would like to stay. Social reasons, they don't want to lose friends, culture, language, religion. And they also believe that they live in a nice environment. So come to our conclusion. So our unique longitudinal evidence offers the steps forward for research and also the policy. Leaders in our research changed their views during this 1 decade. They may change again, especially with the arrival of the new leaders. So this is also the possible topic for a new research, new surveys. Leaders are also active stakeholders, representatives of their countries. Yeah, so they are not like a passive players in a global processes. And also, evidence shows that the Maldives will likely not need to relocate the entire country. So they believe that that they can stay and they will live in the future in the country of origin. Yeah. So we believe that also our findings may be inspiring for other low-lying states. Yeah, the longitudinal interview with Maldivians who are not the leaders would be also useful for understanding how the broader population perceive this issue. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm prepared for answer your question.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for this very interesting presentation of a case study that I think allows us to reflect on the fact that the communities at the front line of the crisis are the ones that should be deciding and should be supported to act on that decision on whether to stay and adapt in place or to mobilize. So thank you for that. We will now move on to our last presentation today by Dr. Justina Orlovska. Doctor, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon for me. Good morning for the others. Can you tell me if my presentation is there?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. How about now?
We can see the entire screen, so there you go.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So I also would like to tell you a little bit about my research in the Maldives. In fact, we met with Robert in 2013 or 14, was it, during the research there. However, I think my perspective will be a little different. I would like to tell you more about what we can learn from the tsunami for the migration. So I'm Justina Orlowska. I'm based in Poland. I'm a sociologist of climate change, and I currently work in the NGO working on energy transition in Poland. It's called Polish Green Network. However, my scientific interest is low-lying countries, especially cultural and social perspective on climate change. And I would like to tell you more about Maldives today. This slide covers Robert's slide a little bit, so you already know basic facts about the Maldives. However, I would like to emphasize, the nature of this country, which is so unique. Can you imagine over 1,000 tiny, very fragile coral islands just laying in the middle of the sea with this very low elevation? Anybody would think that this is like the frontline victim of climate change and sea level rise. So this is really, really unique. That's why I think we both got so interested in this country. So here, one of the pictures is not. Sorry, something is wrong. It's different to what I see when I present it. Yeah, let's try again. Yeah, it doesn't work. Okay, the other picture doesn't work. I just want to show here how big of a problem is a sea level rise and how close the ocean actually is to the houses. And apart from the sea level rise, also Robert mentioned some of the other issues, and I just want to show here the severe effects of very intense and very rapid changes in the rain patterns. You can see now, see here on the picture, Male, which is after just 5 minutes of rain. So it's completely, disorganized, and you can forget about all of your plans or appointments when it's raining. So it's really difficult, to function like this. And the findings that I would like to share today are based on the 3 research projects in 3 different times. So I started in 2013 and 14 with my doctoral thesis and doctoral work. This is where I spent most of the time in the Maldives. and it was focusing on the perspective of the people that are living there on climate change. It was for the Polish Academy of Sciences. In 2017, I was working for UNICEF and conducting research focusing on effects that climate change have on children. And here you can see the picture of our research team on the typical island mean of transportation. And in 2024, I've been there again for longer to collect more data, to write a nonfiction book on climate change adaptation. So I was able to compare again what has changed and what is going on. The book will be published for the very famous publishing house that you have never heard of. It's a Polish-based one. So all together for all these three projects, and I was really careful with these numbers because really there have been a lot. So at least 20 islands have been visited during this time. And I would like to emphasize that many of them have been visited more than once. And I also managed to visit many very remote islands. Some of them had over maybe 100 of inhabitants, so very tiny, very remote islands, not just those close to the Male area, the capital island. And at least 300 IDIs have been collected during this time. So based on these projects, I identified some of the adaptation strategies for Maldives, which are complemented to each other. So these are enlarging the islands that you have already heard about. Also the island consolidation and internal migration connected to this. So basically, the idea is not to move the whole population and go somewhere else to Australia or India, but to move people from those smaller and less populated islands to the bigger islands closer to the capital island, and perhaps build bridges between the two of them, or just consolidate them to have them on the smaller space and closer, less remote. Oh, something doesn't work. Now you can see it, right? Now we can see the picture and everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
But when
If you prefer, we can give you a few minutes to download the presentation on
Do you mind if it's
that.
like this? Do you mind if it's
Yes,
like
yes.
this?
If it is creating a problem for you, is that a problem? We can take a minute to.
Yeah, it's fine for me. So I just wanted to show you this beautiful traditional boat. And I just want to emphasize that Maldivians have been always known in this region as nomads of the sea. So they are used to abandoning their islands for various reasons, as Robert mentioned. If the island doesn't work for them any longer. So this is very normal for them to move from one island to an island. However, in 2004, perhaps now, let's try again. In 2004, tsunami happened. And even though it's not related to climate change, it was a clear reminder for Maldivians that perhaps they have to think about internal migration in a more planned and regular way. And you probably remember this catastrophe. It was December, and this magnificent earthquake happened in the west coast of Sumatra, and destroyed many countries in South Asia. It was the strongest. On the other side of the ocean, but it traveled for 3 hours, and of course lost a lot of its energy, the wave, and it was shrinking from 50 meters to maybe 3 or 4 meters when it reached Maldives, but still it flooded almost all inhabited islands. So you can imagine how, this fragile, tiny islands responded to this tsunami. So 83 people were killed then, many more were injured, and almost 30,000 had to leave their homes. And I would like to tell you more about local response to tsunami, because at that time, nobody even heard about tsunamis in Maldives. Nobody knew what just happened. Even in Male, can you imagine, even when the military service tried to respond to what is going on and organize, some sort of disaster management procedures that were not there before, they had no idea what happened. They only learned from the evening news that was tsunami. So there was no early warning system. The only warning system back then was imams calling to the island people to escape to the mosque, which was in the middle of the island. And here you can see the destroyed mosque in the island of Kandoludu. And another important thing is that because there were no procedures at all, and they used the already existing UN recommendations how to tackle this sort of humanitarian emergencies. However, what I heard from people from the disaster management center that was established that day, on Tsunami Day, they have been traveling to the local islands to examine the aftermath of tsunami. And the main issue were the conflicts within the local communities following those procedures. Because unfortunately, those procedures were not compatible with the local culture. So one of the examples can be that people have been located in the temporary shelters in a very random way. So, for example, stranger men were located in the same room with a stranger woman, which is absolutely unacceptable for a Muslim society. So this raised a lot of issues and a lot of conflicts in these contemporary shelters. So I also would like to tell you about another island that experienced internal migration after tsunami. It's a large island for Maldivian standards in Hadal Atoll. And it hosts, apart from its own community, it also hosts another 3 migrant population that came there in different times for different reasons. But the one that came there after tsunami was from Hatifushi. So what we found out during the UNICEF study examining effects of climate change to children, we visited this island and spoke to all these communities. And we found out that there is a lot of discrimination against this migrant population. And unfortunately, a lot of it is targeting migrant children. So what people shared is that this migrant population from Hatifushi were located in the less livable ward of the island with the poorest roads, with the poorest lighting. And probably because of this, in Maldives at 6 p.m. it's already completely dark. Especially in a small island in the middle of the ocean. So probably because of this darkness, this word was also associated with maybe danger, and perhaps it was one of the reason of this discrimination. So here I have a quotation from one of the mothers from this island. So she said, there is a lot of favoritism among teachers. The migrant population kids are very much targeted. Even when they ask questions, they are silenced by the teachers saying, go to your own island and ask questions, not here. They sometimes refer them as crows. So this was really surprising for not just for me as a foreigner, but also for the Maldivian research team, because we didn't realize that, those islands, those communities would be so much conflicted, but probably because they were forced to live together in an ad hoc basis. This caused all these problems, and this is another case study of Kandaludu. This was a very small island in Ra Atoll, and it's a symbol of tsunami in Maldives because before tsunami it was extremely populated, packed, very small, very fragile island of fishermen. And when tsunami hit, they had to leave immediately in hours to neighboring islands, and also people from these neighboring islands would just take their boats, whoever could do this, and just come to collect them. So they help on this ad hoc basis, and people lived with family members and with friends for a couple of months, and later they were moved to these contemporary shelters. And Kandaludu is very interesting because even before this happened, they wanted to move because it was unlivable. It was impossible to be there. It was like a ticking bomb. And can you imagine then when tsunami hit, the island chef was actually in the capital island of this atoll, printing documents with application to leave the island. So because there was no printer in Kandaludu, so he went there to prepare documents, and while he was there, tsunami hit. So he didn't make it on time, and they had to move, rushing like this. So after years of living in these contemporary shelters with similar issues to the islands that I mentioned before, some internal conflicts, and the situation was not ideal. So Robert already mentioned this concept of safer island. So this started after tsunami, and the government came up with this idea to prepare artificial new island and adapt them, for example, for these communities that lost their former islands. And one of the most famous is Duafaru. It was at the moment of tsunami, it was uninhabited. So they made it bigger and prepared for Kandaludu people, where they can move, I think, in 2008. So today I visited it last year. It's a highly urbanized island with very wide roads, with buses. However, it is not higher, which is very alarming. So the safer island was larger, but not higher. And even the island council confirmed this. And here are some of the other issues connected with this relocation. And these are quotations from the documentary prepared by the Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. So one of the people from the movie said, when we came to Duafaru, the coast seemed to be even lower lying than in Kandaludu. And another person said, IFRC told us that we will all be treated equally, but we don't see it. A couple with one child received one house, and another with 4 kids received nothing. This may sound petty, but it's not, because equality is everything for Maldivian communities. They live in peace because everybody's equal and everybody have the same. So this is really an issue, and it's a shame that nobody thought about this. I'm coming to an end. I can't move the slide. Oh, sorry. Can't move the slide. Let me exit. Maybe now. Oh, so sorry about this. Canva is not that great after all. Okay, here. So just final recommendations. I would like to emphasize that when internal migration, probably not just in Maldives, but maybe other island countries as well, each island should be treated as a separate universe. And it shouldn't be assumed that you can randomly mix and match different communities just because the country is so small and the culture seem homogeneous for us outsiders or even for the governments, but it's not. And community members should be consulted, should be included in the and participate in the policy making process and all plans. And of course, religion and local culture should be taken into account when response measures are being implemented. So thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Dr. Orlovska, for this very interesting presentation, as well as your research study that highlights the fact and some of the challenges that internal mobility can bring. So thank you so much for that. We will now open the Q&A session. So I invite all of our participants and attendees to share your questions on the chat. And I will be happy to ask them to our speakers. In the meantime, I would like to ask a question to Dr. Alice Bayat. Doctor, you talked about the fact that the current instruments and frameworks are somehow not including or considering climate displacement, including the loss and damage funds, and how this is certainly a challenge, and it's something that is trying to or that the international community is trying to address. But then again, seems like displacement is still being treated as a marginal issue. So I wanted to ask you, how can particularly low-income countries and vulnerable communities use the existing tools and frameworks to move from displacement to being treated as a marginal a thing to something that is actually planned for and financed for?
No, thank you for your question. And I hope that my presentation doesn't give the impression actually that displacement is not included in the current instruments and frameworks, because I think on the contrary, we should acknowledge that there have been significant policy developments in recent years and at global level, but also at regional and national levels. And I think we should acknowledge efforts undertaken today by many countries and regions to address displacement. So I would not say actually that displacement is still today treated as a very marginal issue. I still believe that we need to, as I try to explain, displacement is now integrated within the loss and damage architecture in the UNFCCC, but we also need to understand that within the UNFCCC and at COP, there are so many competing issues at stake that yes, displacement is one of the issues that are being discussed. And I think more and more we hear parties making statements where displacement is recognized and used as one of the key illustrations of loss and damage and one of the most visible impacts of climate change. But yes, there are so many other issues to discuss at COP that there's probably more attention that we could expect to be given to that. But that's, it's not always easy. And also, I think we should wonder if UNFCCC is the only and best policy space to address displacement. There are other framework, there are other spaces where we can discuss displacement. I mean, there are migration frameworks who also acknowledge and address that. I mean, we have the Global Compact for Migration, the Global Compact for Refugees. They do reference the impact of climate change and disasters also on mobility patterns. And more, I think, to also answer your question, I mean, I think that those global developments have provided a framework, like a global direction and framework that is now being translated into more regional and national commitments and initiative to address that. Because also displacement has so many, and I think we heard that also from the other panelists with the case of the Maldives, but I mean, you cannot address, I mean, there is no one size fits all approach to address displacement. I mean, we need to take into account the regional disparities, the national characteristics. So it's also good that we see policy developments at country level and at regional level to address that, because there is no one good solutions to address displacement or to prevent displacement. So, and I could quote many examples today, from the planned relocation guidelines in Fiji to the national policy in Bangladesh to address internal displacement in the context of climate change, to regional frameworks in the Horn of Africa or in Latin America. You have so many examples today of policies that demonstrate the country's commitments to tackle the challenge.
Thank you so much for that very comprehensive answer, and for mentioning the fact that there are actually frameworks that address this, but there are just so many other competing issues, and of course this is one of the several things that the international community needs to tackle, and of course that the frontline communities need to deal with themselves. So thank you for that, Dr. Bayat. My following question is to Dr. Robert Stanjanov, and it would be on the fact that in your longitudinal study, you mentioned and you elaborated on the fact that the Maldives, many of the communities and many of the islanders rather stay and adapt in place, even by building artificial islands, than having to migrate or to mobilize internationally. This is a finding that we have seen across several other regions, and it's a finding that is consistent with several other studies that we've seen out there. Even just yesterday, and this goes to my question, yesterday in another panel, we had a speaker mentioning that there needs to be a shift in paradigm and in the narrative, because, and I would like to, my question would be, I would love your opinion on this, on whether you think that there should be a shift in the narrative, going beyond just focusing on the rights of those who move and of populations that have been displaced, because there are already frameworks who talk about these, and Alice touched on this in her previous answer, and strengthening the frameworks and the narratives along the lines of securing the right to stay of the populations who do not want to mobilize. So I wanted to ask your opinion on this, and whether you think that this should be strengthened and that there should be a change in the narrative.
Thank you so much for the question and for the comment. Yeah. So what I remember, yeah, let's say 20 years ago, we started with the idea of environmental refugees, and that hundreds of million, and according one study, also 1 billion environmental refugees will flood the world during the next decade, at the latest to the middle of the century. Yeah. So, you know, we are so far from this concept. Firstly, environmental refugees. Secondly, about the massive migration of climate migrants. Yeah. So there is a huge development for the last 2 decades. So, and now, yeah, 10 years ago, I started my research. I started to think about the idea why majority of the affected population stay in the places of origin and just only the minority would like to leave, yeah, or left the places of origin. So, however, both groups are similarly affected or live in the same place, yeah. When I visited Bangladesh, when I visited East Africa, when I visited islands like Maldives, India. So, and I was thinking, so what does it mean, yeah? Because we expected these hundreds of million, these places, yeah. So, and yeah, I started to understand that for part of the population, the migration could be viewed like an adaptation strategy altogether with other social and economic factors. So we just really, or I just really found like a migrant, we just moved because of climate change impact or any environmental change only. Yeah. So in almost 99% examples was like the combination of the factor, especially the economic one. So for example, this like a flood, cyclone, or drought was viewed like the last step during my decision making. So last point that I said, okay, it's time to go. Yeah. So because yeah, I have opportunity to find a better job, more stable income in the city, for example, better housing, and more security for my family or household. Yeah. So yeah, that's so this combination of factors produce this kind of migration. However, for the last few years, let's say 2 years, we also found because we studied the impact of social media for a decision-making process of like migrants coming to the Europe or to European Union from the Africa, from the Middle East countries. So and we found that their ambitions, their capabilities, their motivation is based on a first like a their personal ambitions. I would like to live better life, and secondly, because of the social media, they found the examples, the cases that it's possible. It's possible to live in Europe, in Italy, in London, in Paris, in Germany, better life. Then I have my life in Bangladesh, then I have my life in Africa, etc. So, and I can do something proactively for that. And, the climate change is one of the effect which produce like my decision to do it and invest my knowledge, my capacity, my finance or finance of whole community for the risk to migrate, to get to the Europe, and it's very risky, yeah. So to get to the Europe from these countries, yeah. So, and a lot of people died, in fact, every year. So, and this is a like this shift from this, as you mentioned, this shift from this concept is, I think, a big development, and this personal shift for some people during their decision making that yeah, I want to stay because of my grandparents and parents and my tradition and history and religion, and and at the end what I will do here when the drought is still coming every year, when the floods is coming almost every year, and when the crops is lowering, and the loss of the harvest is also every year. Yeah. So, and this decision process is fascinating for me, and that's why I visit this, especially for the last year, the South Asian countries like Maldives or Bangladesh, trying to find the answers for these questions, why people move or why people don't move. Yeah, that's why we started to think about this like a new concept, migration as non-adaptation, because we found that majority of our respondents, not only the experts in Bangladesh, but also ordinary people in the Bangladesh Delta, said, I know what is coming. I know what is climate change. I feel that. I see that, but I want to stay. I would like to adapt and stay here. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Doctor. Because definitely in your highlighting the fact that in the end, this is a person's choice. This is a family's choice, and of course, it's something that needs to be respected and accounted for, and is what should actually be leading any sort of response and support. My last question would be
exactly. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a combination of personal and communities or household decision. Thank you so much. Very good point.
Thanks to you. My last question would be to Dr. Justyna Orlowska, and is that on your very, very interesting research study as well, you talk and you discuss a lot the challenges that come along with internal displacement, and with the fact that, and this is also a very consistent finding with what we've seen in other research studies, that when people have to mobilize, very often, firstly, they do it internally, because they are closer to home, they're closer to their families, to their communities, to their culture. But there are also challenges that can come along with that. So I wanted to ask you, if you could provide 2 key recommendations to the international community or to local governments on how to better support communities that are mobilizing internally, and particularly moving from more rural areas to urban areas. So how can we actually help local governments and cities to better integrate the people that are coming from neighboring communities?
Thank you for this question. Well, some recommendations that can be, I think, adapted globally is definitely planning. Climate change is not something that happens overnight, unlike tsunami. So we can observe what is going on around us and plan ahead, and this would definitely help to overcome some of the challenges. And the second recommendation would be always include the interested parties and the local communities in the policy making process, because this almost never happens. And even the example of energy transition, so on the mitigation side, in Poland, still nobody's talking to the miners. I mean, this is incredible. So how can you plan that you will move somebody's house from a place to a place without discussing with them? So this is something that is very much missing.
Thank you for your response and for ending on that note, because that actually is perfect for me to lead the way to the conclusion of this session and of this panel. And my conclusion, it's similar to the ones that I've seen in other sessions, and is that when we're talking about including climate mobility or immobility in international agendas, in the existing frameworks, in global discussions such as what is about to happen at COP, and when it comes to developing solutions for facilitating mobility or for facilitating successful adaptation, people must be at the center of everything. They are the ones who need to decide what their needs are. They are the ones who know what their needs are, and they need to decide how they can be better supported. We are still failing on this. We, the international community, the academia, we're still not being able to do this right. So I just want to highlight the fact that we need to strengthen community-led actions, and I think that is probably the key takeaway from from this panel. So I thank again to all of our speakers as well as to our attendees. There are still sessions the rest of the day, so I invite you all to still join the sessions that we have left for this virtual symposium. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, organizers for this conference, and thank you, Estela, for your great leading us during this session. Yeah, and also presenters, Alice and Justina. Thank you. Have a nice
Thanks to you.
evening.
Bye-bye.